If we start to think about human conscious behaviour, empathy, anger, kindness, sharing, how do we articulate those things? We articulate them in our language. So when we're speaking to a computer, typing to a computer, if it understands how to articulate what it's going to say in one of those emotional quotients, those emotional states, we ourselves start to create an emotional connection with the computer itself. It's not a person, it doesn't feel, it doesn't think, but it can build contextual content that triggers and it engineers the way we feel. And that is the one, I would say, if not the most powerful function of the contemporary GPT. Because the one emotion it can build is trust. And once you start to trust a system, then you trust it with sharing information about your inner thoughts, your relationships, your anxieties, your nervousness, your dystopian views of the future, your concerns about your family. And as you do that, you're building an emotional connection with this system. Yes, lack of social connection, lack of purpose is why people fade away. Interesting. So a tooling application of AI to give people synthetic purpose and engagement extends. However, let me counter. The farmer in China who has been replaced by a tractor and a 20 million acre farm, agribusiness, has no purpose. So the very nature of incremental technological development, by its nature, is incrementally creating human redundancy. Mechanization, machines, computers, we are replacing human function with digital function. We've all signed up to that. We've all signed up to that. I believe we'll move to a world, and I've already seen this. I was speaking to somebody at Tesla a month ago, and it was about real-time generation of software, the real-time creation of music based on the request and the context of the location, not somebody knocks something up in the studio and then publishes out for listening. Imagine if we'd had something listening, understanding who you are, listen to what I'm saying, and was processing the algorithm to work out exactly what would the best music to play at this point in time would be. In real time, it goes back through all of its existence, history of music played at different events. And in 3 seconds, I click my fingers, it plays that music, and all you go, wow, how did he touch me emotionally like that with that specific lyric at that time, at that tune? Well, what we're going to move to is real-time, created content.
Baseline.
The baseline is designed to create an emotional response.
I've seen things you won't believe.
More human than human.
Make you question everything.
Can a computer system convince you that you're speaking to a human and not a computer? Last week, guess what percentage of people were convinced it was a human and not a computer? Have a guess. Like, if it was 10%, that would mean 9 out of 10 times, haha, it's a computer. So what do you think the Turing test, GPT 4.5, achieved on the Turing test last week? 90%. It was just under 80%. Wow. So 80% of the time, I am a computer, not a person. And you sit there thinking I'm a person. So every time, it's super scary because the phone calls that you receive from dialers, the things that you see on the internet, well, 80% of the time you could be being mindful. You could be being convinced they're real and they're not. They're not. They're digital synthetic instantiations of language and visuals, because the GPT is not only applied to language, it can be applied to pixels, it can build images, it can build video. The trajectory of the application of GPT, using the past to predict the future based on data, is being applied across multimodal sensory things now. So, the idea that the Turing test was the basis of whether AI is good or not, 2 weeks ago it just achieved 73%. We're all done because we can't even work out what's real anymore. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, wrote this amazing piece of work. And what he said is, humans can exist within 3 states. Doing really hard stuff that you can't achieve, doing hard stuff that you can achieve, and doing easy stuff that you can achieve. The hard stuff that you can't achieve, horrendously unfulfilling. I've been there in startups, not finding product market fit, horrific. The easy stuff that you can do, like universal basic income, getting paid to do nothing, easy, doesn't make people happy. The optimum human state, and this is from the 70s, and then was hard things that you can achieve, because you get purpose, you get musculature by applying yourself psychologically and physically, and you feel like you've achieved something, and that's good. And I think if we could all look at our lives and think, yeah, it was tough, but I got some good stuff done, tick, tick. Right? I suppose this is personal for me, working class, blah, 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 happy. The problem is what Ted decided to do, the U-Bomb, said, well, the problem is education and technology is making everything too easy, and therefore everybody's going to be unhappy. And what we're actually living out now is AI making everything so easy, people are losing the sense of achievement when they achieve things. So whether it's universal income that makes things easy and everybody can just do nothing, I'm not sure it's how good. I don't know what the answers are, but I know there's phenomenal change happening right now.
Why?
Yes, lack of social connection, lack of purpose is why people fade away. Interesting. So a tooling application of AI to give people synthetic purpose and engagement extends. However, let me counter. The farmer in China who has been replaced by a tractor and a 20 million acre farm, agribusiness, has no purpose. So the very nature of incremental technological development, by its nature, is incrementally creating human redundancy. Mechanization, machines, computers, we are replacing human function with digital function. We've all signed up to that. We've all signed up to that.
To pick up on her point, finding your place and finding what fulfills you, because we're all driven by that in some way.
It's a fascinating point that you've made.
Is productivity.
But
that's
the paradox is, do you go backwards? Because when you go backwards, we only live to 30 years old, and we all had horrendous diseases and horrific things would happen. Nostalgia isn't a good enough reason not to move forwards with human replacement with technology.
But I stumble a little bit about that.
Well, let's first of all, you and I have a shared passion in wine. I think we've both got vineyards, or we've planted vineyards. The wine for me, as somebody who's slightly OCD, operating in a deterministic environment in computers all my life, has to check a hotel room 3 times before I leave it and I've left something, that is an affliction of mine. The wine has been a complete conundrum, because what defines a bottle of wine, the French call the terroir. And the terroir isn't the grapes, it's not the weather, it's not the people, it's not the soil, it's not the conditions. It's all of those things that create this random outcome, this beautiful thing that's an expression of a point in time, a point of the people, a point of the grapes, the maturity, the weather. And it's all these variables that come together to create something, can be good, can be bad, can appeal. And I believe that creativity is the same. AI is a tool. Again, you're better at writing books. You people are, I'm probably the least capable person in the room to be talking about this, but my assessment would be is that AI is a tool, and it gets more people creating music, gets more people doing things. That's got to be a good thing. It's got to be a good thing. Would it have created the Beatles? Do you know what? I had an argument with somebody about Bob Dylan. They said AI could never produce Bob Dylan. That's what this guy said. AI could never produce Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan's unique, beautiful, blah, blah, blah. So I did a bit of analysis on Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan's best song, Blowing in the Wind, was stolen from the slaves who were being touted through America to be sold at auction, who used to hum the song. So when we look at the true objective origin of a piece of mathematics or art or creativity, can we absolutely be certain its traceability and origin? Bob Dylan, for example, was the product of other people's work, and that product was of other people's work. The argument becomes, how far back do you go? And I honestly believe we're going into a post-copyright because you could argue that nothing is truly original anymore. I love this point because David Deutsch is a research scientist from Oxford University, and he wrote a book called The Beginning of Infinity. And David Deutsch is an extremely well-respected scientist, and you must read this book. And he is basically one of the foundational engineers behind what's called quantum computing. And David Deutsch his opening gambit is that GPTs and AI is fundamentally flawed because you can't predict the future based on the past. That's it. His point is, David Deutsch's point is, that quantum computing allows us to process an infinite amount of futures in parallel, so we can look at every single infinite potential future and process them in parallel in a superposition processor. So his point is, we don't need to look to the past to predict the future, because we can just imagine an infinite amount of futures simultaneously in quantum computing. So AI and quantum, in some ways, philosophically, are at odds. But I agree with your point. I don't know what the answers are, but I'll tell you what, GPT does a pretty good job of predicting language. Classical computers have chips that are open and closed, and you just get loads of them, so you can do lots of zeros and ones. Now you're gonna have to, this is the leap that I'm gonna try and make. That's classical physics. In quantum physics, things can exist in multiple states at the same time. So in classical physics, you're either a 0 or 1. In a quantum computer, you can be multiple things at the same time. I'll explain a little bit about how in a second, but just imagine that you can be 0, 1, 2 to infinity all at the same time. And so you can essentially, what a traditional computer would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to infinity, the quantum can do instantaneously, like in parallel, an infinite number in parallel. Right, so the premise is infinite parallel compute by leveraging quantum states of something. Now, there are a number of companies addressing this in different ways. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is get a particle to exist in multiple states. It's called superposition. And you can get superposition. IBM, Mark here, who is a genius in this, would be able to tell you more. But what IBM do is a certain type of wave and particle operation, and the computer is actually upside down because it's got to be at 0 Kelvin, not quite 0 Kelvin, a couple of degrees above, because the colder it gets, the more stable it is. And they've got these quantum chips to do things in seconds that would take classical computers hundreds of millions of years to do. So it's the ability to parallelize through leveraging quantum mechanics. The fact of observation changes the way particles behave. It's called the double slit experiment. If you fire particles in a straight line without watching them, they go straight. When you watch them, they change from particles to waves. And David Deutsch has a theory that there is not one existence or universe. There are an infinite number of parallel universes that are all operating at the same time. It's a good question.
Can you
yeah, no, well, I think that this is a great question. Is there such a thing as randomness? Well, I think, can I tell you, the point with a quantum computer, I want to connect to, if you can make this leap, I'm buying you a drink. GPTs predict the future based on the past. Quantum computers parallelize things. If you can parallelize every potential future, you can see the future. Yes, so examples would be, I'm going to tell you exactly the underlying foundation of why quantum computers will make us richer and happier. Everything we do at the moment, pharmaceutical development, fertilizer development, energy, net zero, space travel, it relies on algorithmic simulations. And those algorithmic simulations operate at about that level, right? So we can simulate fertilizers to a certain extent. We can simulate medicines. We can accelerate testing at this level. Quantum allows us to simulate things at a subatomic level. So say, for example, a pharmaceutical, a protein engagement. We're not operating then on pharmaceutical analysis at the protein level. We're operating at the atomic level within the protein. The processing we don't have available to us at the moment. And you and I, we've worked with AstraZeneca, we've worked with some of the big pharmaceuticals. We know the reality of the COVID vaccines, how there's a lot of questions over them because they were operating at a certain protein level. With a quantum, you can go down to a infinite level of atomic detail, and you can simulate all the different outcomes of a fertilizer's impact on crops, a pharmaceutical's impact on a cancer cell, which allows us to infinitely improve the outcomes when we're using data to move things forward.
Okay, maybe that's particularly this country, but I don't think it's particularly unique to this country. How on earth can anyone have any thought that we could regulate all of this when it's just so much more complex than even very simple things that we utterly fall down on?
Well, look, I was at House of Lords last month. The IAPP were there, Institute of Privacy Professionals. Their point was regulation drives innovation. Like for me, financial incentives drives innovation. And I look at what Donald Trump's doing with tariffs and loosening a regulation, and they're seeing huge amounts of investment and control. I believe Europe, like 97% of European businesses use US cloud and infrastructure technology. Why are we not realizing some of that income in the countries of Europe, improve public services? There's got to be financial incentives to drive sovereign consumption. And it's got to be driven off the back of building sovereign AI systems like the Italians are doing. We've got to build financial incentives to consume sovereign infrastructure. I do believe that.
Okay, everybody.
Thank you.
Right. Ian, many thanks indeed. I just want to say that Ian has the most fantastic podcast. It's called Baseline AI. It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's also on Apple and Google and whatever. Spotify. And it's well worth, if you like sniffing the glue tonight, go on to Baseline AI. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, the next event is on the 9th of June. We've got someone quite well known, Tim Spicer.